Dear friends, do not be astonished that a trial by fire is occurring among you, as though something strange were happening to you. But rejoice to the degree that you have shared in the sufferings of Christ, that when his glory is revealed, you may rejoice also and be glad. If you are insulted for the name of Christ, you are blessed, because the Spirit of glory, who is the Spirit of God, rests on you. But let none of you suffer as a murderer, or a thief, or a criminal, or a troublemaker. But if you suffer as a Christian, do not be ashamed, but glorify God that you bear such a name. In this way, Peter is speaking to the Christians of Asia Minor in 1 Peter chapter 4, verses 12 through 16. And in a way, he has really provided a summing up of everything he's been trying to say to them and in his attempt to encourage them. And he's bringing two streams together. In fact, maybe even three streams together that he has been preparing and leading to throughout his discussion. He has spent the time beforehand encouraging the Christians of Asia Minor to realize they have been saved to this great hope, and they're waiting for the ultimate manifestation of the salvation when Jesus returns. And that because of this, they should live as holy people, they should live in love, they should be sustained and nourished by the Word of God. That they are a temple of God in Christ, and that they are, in fact, the new Israel. He's encouraged them to consider how they are living in the midst of people who do not share everything that they believe in and are going to be hostile toward them, and to conduct themselves accordingly, to expect that kind of resistance from those who are living around them. And that they should look to the example of Christ, who suffered even though he did well. He did not suffer because he was committing crimes, or because he did illegal things, or because he had sinned. He instead suffered because he was trying to do good, and that if we're going to be Christians, we are going to likely be called to follow that example. Then he starts talking about the very thing he's talking about here, the fact that we might be called upon to suffer for doing good, and that we still need to persevere in faith in so doing. A few verses earlier, he introduced in verse 7 that the culmination of all things is near. The expectation of the Lord's return, and if nothing else, all that remains is for the Lord to return. All other things in God's drama have been accomplished. And so we've seen how he's been helping the Christians understand, number one, you're going to live in a hostile culture. You're going to have to be prepared for that. People are going to treat you a certain way because of that. Number two, people are going to treat you poorly even though you're doing good. And number three, the end of all things is near. And all of these are brought together in this concluding portion of what we call 1 Peter chapter 4. And he begins with this message. Don't be surprised that this is happening. This is something that we can sometimes chide people about, but we shouldn't. The Gentile Christians that Peter's writing to here have no history with this. They have believed in all kinds of gods before. They have never experienced religious persecution. So it would seem strange. It would seem weird for them that this is happening. They may wonder if God or the gods are angry at them. And that's why Peter says, don't be surprised at this. Don't be shocked at all that this is coming upon you as if it were something strange. And then he again points out, as he has so many times before, that you have shared in the sufferings of Christ. I.e., look at what Jesus went through. Jesus did good, and look at what they did to him. Likewise, you're doing good in the name of Jesus. They're going to probably do the same things to you. And the reason that you rejoice in that is because when he is revealed in his glory, you will be glorified, and you will rejoice and be glad. There's that arc that happens so many times that Peter is aware of. He saw in Jesus, that Paul talks about. That's really one of those transformative things in Christianity. That Jesus humbled himself deeply and suffered greatly, but God exalted him. And that if we suffer with Jesus, God will exalt us in him and glorify us in him. We see that in Romans 8, Philippians 2, and Peter is evoking that here, going back to the things he talked about there in chapter 1. And in so doing, he's trying to normalize this experience for Christians. He's supposed to normalize the experience of persecution, that this is something that you need to be prepared for. It may not always come, but you should not be surprised when it comes. And the way that you respond needs to be to rejoice in Jesus, to continue to trust in God in Christ, looking forward to the reward that you will have in him. That in fact, if you suffer that insult, you are blessed because that Spirit of glory, the Spirit of God, evoking Isaiah 11:2, has come upon you. That's what he's trying to really encourage these Christians to think about. But then he looks at the other side of the situation. Something he is often concerned about. He talked about this also in chapter 2. That no one among the Christians should suffer as a murderer or a thief or a criminal. Very severe and significant things, right? And by criminal here, Peter's not talking about when a state is trying to make certain things illegal to justify itself. He's talking about the kinds of transgressive behaviors that societies and cultures should be condemning here. He's saying that you might suffer because of bad things that you did, and that suffering is just because you did the bad thing. That's not the way Christians should be suffering. The interesting thing is that fourth one he mentions, the troublemaker in the New English translation, the allotrio episkopos, which is the only time that word is used in the New Testament. In fact, people think maybe Peter even made it up. Another overseer, allotrio episkopos. Episkopos, a bishop, episcopal, that's where that word comes from. Another overseer, somebody acting like the boss of somebody else who was not given that role of authority. Very interesting that that's what Peter inserts here with things like stealing and murder and crime, being the boss of another. It may not seem to be on the same level, but Peter is clearly concerned about it. Instead, if you suffer as a Christian, do not be ashamed, but glorify God that you have been able to bear that name. Christian is seen in three passages. Here in Acts 11, where we're told they were first called Christians in Antioch, and in Acts 26, when Agrippa asked Paul if he would indeed become a Christian so quickly. We are to understand that it is likely came from a pejorative sense. It is actually coming from a Latin base. It's not a Greek base. And since it's coming out of Antioch, it may have something to do with some kind of Roman government official. Who else would be speaking Latin in Antioch of Syria? And trying to understand these things, calling them the little Christs. And it's interesting that, especially for Christians, that we should honor that. That yes, it was something that said derisively, but we want to be as little Christ. We are called to be one of Christ or little Christs. And that we are, in fact, to take hold of that name. And that if we suffer as people trying to be like Christ, we should glorify God in that. It's such a fascinating passage here. Because in so many ways, Christians today have a persecution complex. They look around and they're primed to see persecution everywhere. They see how there had been a time when Christianity had much more social cachet and was much more respected in society. And we're seeing a time now where Christianity has become less normal, where there are a lot of critiques about the way that Christians have conducted themselves and how Christians have done many things. And especially noting the response to that kind of situation. And so we should be open to the fact that we might be experiencing kinds of persecution that maybe our ancestors a few generations ago would not. That certain things that we believe based upon what God has made known in Christ will not sit well with people in our society. If we continue to hold on to them, we may face ostracism, derision, resistance, economic hardship, and maybe even something greater. On the other hand, note the way that Peter is continuing to warn Christians about this, about the fact that you can suffer because you did bad things, that you shouldn't be acting like a boss you shouldn't be. And then also, and as we're going to see in a minute, what should you do because of that situation? So first of all, not everything people cry out as persecution is persecution. Right now, a lot of churches going through difficulties because of how many of its leaders committed sexual abuse against women and children, for instance, and now there is a legal and societal reckoning about those things. That's not persecution. That's people being held accountable for the crimes that they committed. And the problem is not that it's being exposed. The problem is that conduct existed in the first place, was justified, rationalized, or excused in the first place. And this is the judgment that is being rendered by society. If we, because we feel like we're being persecuted, decide we're going to act like jerks, then we're not glorifying Jesus and we're going to suffer, but we're going to suffer justly because we're being seen as jerks. It doesn't justify that kind of immature response to the experience of challenge, difficulty, or persecution. We especially want to focus in, though, on that allotrio episkopos, the other boss. Because there are a lot of people who have taken it upon themselves to become the bosses of others when God did not give them that authority or has made that judgment. You can appeal to Ezekiel and the watchmen all you want. God appointed Ezekiel. He hasn't appointed you. God has episcopoi in the places he wants them. There's the government doing the thing it's supposed to do. And then in the church, there are elders doing what they're supposed to do, as Peter's going to talk about in just a few verses. There is no call to, therefore, be the watchman, being the boss of other people in other places. There will be judgment against that. We should be careful lest we act and presume we can take on that role of being the judge of everybody else. And it's not just pointing out other people doing that. We need to be careful about that temptation within ourselves, both among people within our congregation, with people we know outside the congregation, people in general, to try to become that additional boss that we have never been authorized to become, that we shouldn't suffer as, and that God will hold us accountable if we try to be. But what does Peter expect Christians to do because of this? He expects them to rejoice in God and to look forward. Because he says, "For it is time for judgment to begin, starting with the house of God. And if it starts with us, what will be the fate of those who are disobedient to the gospel of God? And if the righteous are barely saved, what will become of the ungodly and sinners? So then, let those who suffer according to the will of God entrust their souls to a faithful Creator as they do good." So notice how Peter has put all this together. He says the judgment is coming. He's already said the culmination of all things is at hand. Now he says the day of judgment is near. But he says it begins at the house of God. Peter is an astute observer of how God works in the history of the people of God. God has judged the nations, but God generally starts by cleaning house. And he cleans house among his own people. And we see how that works with Israel in the wilderness, Israel in the days of the judges, in the days of the kings, the exiles of 722 and 586, the judgments afterward, the impending judgment upon Jerusalem that Peter would no doubt be aware of coming in a few years. And thus it would be also with his people. We always need to be open to the fact that the things we're experiencing might be a form of God's judgment upon us. Yes, we're looking for that ultimate judgment. Peter may have that in mind, but Peter also would not deny or doubt that there are times where God has judged his people within history. And maybe all of the apocalyptic things that we're seeing about the church are a way that God is judging his people right now. And if those of us who have been saved at great expense and great difficulty are barely saved, and we shouldn't read too much into that in terms of our standing before God, but just the recognition of these things, as he's quoting from Proverbs 11, what will become of the ungodly and sinners? What about those who do not obey the gospel of God? Interesting way Peter puts that, right, and frames in terms of obeying the message that, well, if Jesus is God in the flesh, who suffered for us and died, was raised again in power, and now reigns as Lord, and is going to come back soon, you got to do something about that. You've got to serve him. Those who don't, those who maintain their alienation from God, will endure that alienation for all time. That's just what's going to happen to them. And God is going to judge. And so it goes back to, when you see all this stuff and you feel that you have been treated unjustly, and there's very few feelings that are worse than when we feel like we've been treated unjustly. Judgment is coming. Peter says, first turn to yourself. God's going to first turn to you. Don't get all excited about how God's going to judge everybody else. Don't get thirst for how God's going to judge others. Realize God's judgment starts with us, and that should cause us a little bit of fear and an opportunity to confess and lament and repent of the things that we may be doing that may be hastening God's judgment in ways that are not pleasant and not good. But yes, there's going to be judgment for everybody, and that's how Peter wraps it all up. What should we do? These things are going to happen. What should we do? Great summary. Let those who suffer according to God's will entrust their souls to a faithful Creator while doing good. The message of the Psalms, the message of the Old Testament, is Yahweh is the Creator. Yahweh displays covenant loyalty to his people. That is something that is drilled in over and over again, and Peter here exemplifies that. God is our Creator. He has made us. He is good. He is in control of all things, and he is faithful. He is the one who will judge, not us. We are bad at it. He is good at it. We are short-sighted about it. He can take the long view. That's why it's not as if we just act, lol, nothing matters, injustice is going on. It is a problem. It's a big deal. But if God were just to eliminate injustice, he would also eliminate us, because we have been unjust and we have been immoral. And that is why we entrust ourselves to a faithful Creator. Let God handle the judgment. Let God handle those things. What are we supposed to do? To do good. We might suffer for doing good. We need to do that good anyway. That good is not, let's try to retake the culture so we can have the cultural prestige we once had. That is not what Peter says. That's not what Peter suggests. It is counterintuitive and counterproductive to what Peter suggests. That is not the way of Jesus. That is the way of the powers and principalities over this present darkness. Instead, what Peter tells us to do is that we should not be surprised when it comes upon us, should not shake our faith, it should not cause consternation. We instead then need to look to Jesus. Since Jesus suffered these things, Jesus then was glorified by the Father. That we will suffer these things. We need to keep doing good like Jesus did, that we may also be glorified by our Father when it's all said and done, when that judgment takes place, and when the consummation of all things has happened. Therefore, let all of us, as we go about our lives, not suffer as a sinner, not suffer as a meddler or trying to be somebody else's boss, but if we're called upon to suffer as a Christian, to endure that suffering and trusting ourselves as a faithful Creator and to do good. I'm Ethan. I work at the Venice Church of Christ. We're so glad that you've joined us today. Thank you for providing the opportunity to spend this time together. If you have any questions or comments on anything we've talked about in terms of 1 Peter chapter 4, we'd love for you to do so and let us know in the comments. And if we can be of any further encouragement to you, please let us know. Please visit us at VeniceChurchofChrist.org. We're also on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, and YouTube. And may the Lord bless and keep you until we're able to meet again.